Welcome. In this video, we're going to look at solving a quadratic application problem. We're asked to determine the dimensions of a rectangular area rug with an area of 48 feet squared as well as a perimeter of 28 feet. So finding the dimensions, we are asked to find the dimensions, and it's the dimensions of a rectangle. Now, traditionally, we refer to those as length and width. So I'm going to use for my two variables, L and W. L obviously to represent length and W to represent width. Now what you'll notice here is we have two variables, and you should recall from previously in this semester, if you have two variables, you must have or be able to develop two equations. Well, let's look at some of the other information. We know that the area is equal to 48 feet squared. And we are dealing again with the area of a rectangle. So the area of a rectangle is the product of the length times the width. Or rather, in this case, since it's 48, we'll say 48 equals L times W. Dealing with the perimeter is 28 feet. Now, thinking about a rectangle has two lengths and two widths, and perimeter means the sum of the sides. So I can say that P equals 2W plus 2L, or rather, since the perimeter is equal to 28, we have 28 equals 2W plus 2L. And you'll notice I now have two equations here. So my goal when solving this is to try and create one equation with just one variable. Since my equations don't look very similar, I'm going to rearrange and I'm going to say, well, 48 over W equals L. And if 48 over W equals L, then I can substitute that in, and my new equation with just one variable will be 28 equals 2W plus 2L, and again, L is 48 over W. So now we are solving one equation with one variable. I created that substitution, subbing 48 over W in for L, and now I just have one variable. So simplifying this a little bit, I have 28 equals 2W, and 48 times 2 is 96 over W. Now I'm dealing with a rational equation. And when we're dealing with rational equations, one of the easiest things to do would be to multiply the equation by the LCD. My LCD is my only denominator here, W, to clear the fractions. And when I distribute that W across, I have 28W equals 2W squared plus W times 96 over W is just going to equal 96. At this point, you notice we have a quadratic equation. I'm going to put this quadratic equation in descending order, equal to 0, so that's 2W squared. That would be minus 28W plus 96. I'm going to go ahead and factor out a GCF because that's going to reduce the values of these numbers. So I'm going to factor out 2 since all of my terms have an even coefficient. So that's W squared minus 14W plus 48. And since we're multiplying by 2, I can divide by 2 on both sides and reduce that out. Now I have 0 equals W squared minus 14W plus 48. You could have solved this quadratic equation without factoring that 2 out, but it does reduce our numbers and it makes it easier for us to see what the two values are that we might be choosing that are going to sum to equal that negative 14. So we've got to have a product, two numbers that multiply to give us positive 48 and add to give us negative 14. Those two numbers are going to be negative 6 and negative 8. So here I have 0 equals w minus 6 and w minus 8. And solving each of those, I will get that w equals 6 or 8. Now remember, L was equal to 48 over w. So we have values for the width, but we also need the other dimension. L equals 48 over w. So if my width is 6 feet, then L equals 48 over 6 or 8 feet. And similarly, if I say, well, if W was equal to 8 feet, then L would equal 48 over 8, or rather 6 feet. So whichever one is the width, 6 or 8, the other one would represent the length. Therefore, the dimensions, we would say 6 feet by 8 feet. And that would be our solution. And I just want to encourage you to make sure you read, especially when you're working on the computer and you're entering your two answers, because the computer problem may specify that maybe the shorter side represents the width, or vice versa. So just paying attention. But the dimensions are 6 feet by 8 feet. And again, because this is an application problem, we can check. 6 by 8, 6 times 8, that gives me my area up here of 48. And 2 times 6 plus 2 times 8, that's going to sum to my perimeter of 28. So always make sure you check, make sure your application problem answers make sense in the context of the problem with which you're working. All right. Hope you have a great day. Good luck out there.